All right, we're live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of the MVRed podcast. Where it's like the Undertaker, like in his casket coming through, back from the dead. People thought we were gone. People thought we were no more, but we're here, and we're ready to go, Dane, aren't we?
Yeah. How are you doing, Michael? How are you? What's your shirt say?
It's just an Under Armour shirt.
Oh,
Right
okay.
here, got the American flag going.
I think the cool kids no longer wear Under Armour. They wear Lululemon.
Is that it?
Yeah, Under Armour's kind of dated. It's kind of chuggy, as the Zoomers like to say.
Well,
Are
I'm
you?
sure this is an American T-shirt that was made in like Bangladesh or something like that.
Yeah,
So
the best kind. So Michael, when was the last time we did an episode of this podcast? When was the
it
last
was
time?
March of 2023. So what, 14 months ago?
And why? Like in that time, I think I conceived and had a child. We built a fence on our house, and I mean it's been pretty busy. But why haven't we done it? Why? What explains it, Michael?
I just, I would say I lacked an interest in Paul. I was a little defeated, obviously, after 2020, and then 2022 rolled around,
Yeah,
and we had high expectations that we were going to have a great 2022 midterm,
that's
and we
true.
kind of failed.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was just kind of turned off by politics there for some time. And I would say in the last maybe 3-4 months, I've had a renewed interest in politics. I started tweeting a little bit more from the MVRed Twitter account, and
Yeah.
yeah, so now I'm ready to go.
Um, I find that my interests, I've always been interested in politics, dramatically so, but I do find that like it waxes and wanes, right? Depending upon the time of the year and depending upon what happens. Like if you lose an election, your interest drops to zero, but then it gradually pulls you back in. And I agree. Things got kind of boring and lame. And this election I thought it was going to be kind of stale, to put it mildly, but it's been anything but stale, particularly over the last couple of weeks with the shooting, with the debate even further behind that, and now the JD Vance pick. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of energy in this current election.
Yeah, there is, and it's been a fascinating summer, and we're gonna kind of walk through it. I have a little bit of a timeline here on
Oh
our
yeah,
on our episode notes where I really took the time here to try to piece this all together, because it's been an interesting summer in terms of how it began and where we're at now. And I'll kind of spell out some of these things right now, and then we could dive into each of them individually. But let's go back to late May 30th, the big Trump trial in Manhattan. I followed it pretty closely, and at the time, I actually wanted to have a podcast, but we ended up not being able to. And I followed it, and the two big witnesses in this case were Stormy Daniels, the porn star, and then that attorney Cohen. What's his first name? And the name escapes me.
Michael Cohen,
Michael Cohen. Yeah, I should know that.
right?
Michael. And Michael Cohen had a disastrous time on the stand, and Stormy Daniels' story about this whole situation has been all over the map for 5 or 6 years now. So the two star witnesses didn't perform all that well. And so I thought, from my perspective, as somebody, again, who voted for Trump twice, that at the very least, there had to be somebody on that jury that was unwilling to convict him on all 34 counts. And I ended up being incorrect. So May 30th, Trump's convicted on 34 counts in Manhattan found guilty of falsifying documents to cover up that payment to silence Stormy Daniels leading up to the 2016 election. So at the
Right.
time, the Dems, the media, take a victory lap, right? They're excited. They're pumped up. They're like, we got him. We got him. So then fast forward almost a month later, June 27th, the highly anticipated debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump many of us, Dane, I'm sure you're included on the right, we're eager for this opportunity because we have seen the unfortunate deterioration of Joe Biden from his just his age, his mental state. He's just not with it like he used to be, and so the fear for
No, he has a
Daniel.
stutter. He
Go
has a
ahead.
stutter, Michael. He has a stutter.
Yes, the infamous stutter.
Yeah, he
And
has a stutter. That's all a stutter. I mean, I think that's ableist language of what you're saying because it's clearly a stutter.
correct.
I'm a stutter truther, right? Like, you know how they have the truthers about 9/11? I'm a stutter truther. I always thought that was so stupid. I'm sorry, I'll let you go back here in timeline, but I remember Joe Biden debating Sarah Palin in 2008. And then I also remember him debating Paul Ryan in 2012. And that's not, I mean, he's well established. He's been in the limelight. And he was a very fluid, very aggressive debater. I think he beat Paul Ryan. I don't remember if he beat Sarah Palin. I think she did well at that debate, or maybe it was a disaster. I can't remember. Maybe she did well at her convention speech and then lost the debate. But the point was that Joe Biden was very fluid, very loquacious. He's an Irish Catholic. One thing about the Irish Catholics is they know how to talk. And then all of a sudden, when he started to go through this mental decline, that's age-related dementia or senility, there's like he has a stutter. And it was just a lie. I don't know how else to put it. Like he doesn't have a stutter. And if he had a stutter, that it was so irrelevant that like it didn't affect his performance. And what we saw in his decline had nothing to do with a stutter. And it's just it's the line. It's the line that gets to me. But anyways, keep going, Michael. Keep going.
Yeah. No. So, anyways, it ended up being a disastrous night for Joe Biden. Post debate polls came out. CNN had one. I think CBS. There's a more official one from Ipsos that had Trump winning the debate 60% to something like 20 some percent. Anyways, it was a disastrous night for Joe Biden and really for the media, who in the weeks leading up to that debate was telling us that conservative media was pushing out these things called cheap fakes, these doctored videos of Joe Biden to make him look like he's losing his mind. Yet anybody with a brain could see over the last few years that these incidents were happening more frequently. And so that's
Right.
exactly what happened there. He had that moment in the debate where his brain just like turned off for 5 seconds. It was very awkward. And then he finished it with, I beat Medicare or Medicaid or something like that.
I beat Medicare.
Yeah, I beat Medicare. It just he struggled through the debate. And so after that debate, now all of a sudden the media, the Democrats are all nervous, right? We can't beat Trump with Biden. What are we going to do? He's struggling. He's going to falter in the polls. So now there's this huge push in late June, early July to remove Joe Biden from the Democrat ticket. Then July 1st rolls around. Just keeps getting bad for the Democrats. The Supreme Court rules that the president of the United States, in this case it's Trump, because that's what the case was about, has absolute immunity for official acts that take place while the president's in office. And there's not absolute immunity for unofficial acts, but still it's a victory for Trump in that Supreme Court case. The next day, the Manhattan, the judge there, Merchan, decides to delay the sentencing until some point in September. It was supposed to be before this convention that's happening right now, and it ended up being pushed out to some point in September. We'll see if that even actually happens in the midst of everything else taking place right now. Then, just this past weekend, obviously, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump at the Butler, Pennsylvania.
Wait, can you just pause right there, Michael?
Yes.
Just literally, what you just said, like the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, like how crazy. Like I know it's happened and we've kind of accepted it, but like just take a pause and it's they almost assassinated like 1 inch, less than an inch, a major political candidate, a major political figure. It's mind-boggling. Anyways, keep going. Keep like the fact that you said that sentence, right? It's just crazy the situation we're in. But yeah, I'm sorry. Keep going with your little list.
No, I mean it's remarkable. It was a fear of many that with the the feelings, that the polarization of our country, the quite frankly the hatred of Donald Trump by a hefty segment of our population, that it just takes one person in a country of 330 plus million people to put something like this together and say, I'm going to do it. And that's exactly what happened. So we'll talk a little bit about that later in the episode. And then, of course, yesterday, Donald Trump picks the first term U.S. Senator here from the state of Ohio, JD Vance. I know Dane's a big supporter of JD and even had a fundraiser for him prior to him becoming a U.S. Senator here. So he was named the running mate for Donald Trump at the convention yesterday in Milwaukee. So it's been a bit busy summer. We're only in the middle of July. There's still a long way to go. We still don't know what's going to happen with Joe Biden and the Democrats. We don't know what's going to come of the results, and as more and more facts come out as it relates to the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And then there's some additional debates that are going to take place in the months ahead. So there's plenty more to come. But thus far, the last 45 days have been pretty crazy in the political arena.
So there's a lot going on, and I feel like a lot of people have discussed it in multiple things. I want to take a step back. If you look at the thesis of this show, your podcast, Michael, and like 30 years ago, you had a blog, MVRed, and the whole thesis was the Mahoning Valley, which was a blue collar Democratic bastion, right? It was an anchor of the Democrats' power in Ohio because you needed Youngstown in the Mahoning Valley to win. And it wasn't just Youngstown, the city, it was Mahoning County, Trumbull County, Ashtabula County, Portage County, not Geauga. It was always red. Even Columbiana County, I think, way back in the day, used to be blue. There was this blue corner of Northeast Ohio, meeting, Lake County, Cuyahoga County, Summit County, right? And the rest of the state was red. So your thesis was, like this valley can turn red. And that was a pipe dream 20 years ago, whenever you started writing your blog. And now it's reality. And I think it's reality because the Republican Party has rightly changed. When you're into politics and you're a partisan, you support parties not because they're perfect. They're flawed institutions. And I take a very Catholic or Christian view that like all human institutions are by necessity flawed or imperfect. Political parties they're coalitions. You don't get everything you want. But the Republican Party, I think, has dramatically evolved to the point where it's winning Mahoning Valley. And those voters feel that they have a voice and they're speaking up and they don't feel that the Democratic Party represents them. And I think it all comes down to, Trump just recently selected rather, JD Vance as the VP. And I think this is the cementing of this thesis and this party evolution. So, there's all these events that are kind of the micro or the tactical, right, that happen on a day-to-day basis, the Trump trials, the assassination. But there's another story here that I think is a broader story about the evolution of the Republican Party and its evolution into an institution that is it's a broad church that's reflective of the various aspects of America and particularly the various class aspects, the working class, right, the middle class. Because I think, quite frankly, the Democrats are a party that they're a coalition of the barbells, right? The very, very wealthy, the rootless international cosmopolitan class that has no loyalty to this country, the college educated apparatchiks who staff the bureaucracies and like the HR departments, right, who are really into pronouns or whatever crazy theory is currently popular. So that's one end. And then like on the other end, like the welfare dependents, the proletariat, the immigrants, illegal, masses of illegal immigrants, a lot of legal immigrants, frankly, who view America as an economic zone and not a country, not a nation with a people. And the Republicans have aided this vision with the Democrats, but they're evolving and they're evolving in the right direction. So that's the point I wanted to make. And I didn't mean to take away from the timeline, but I think it's important to keep in mind that like this vision of the Republican Party is real. It's happening. I think it's frankly encouraging.
Yeah, it's and you spelled out my blog from my days in high school, and that vision of something that at the time it was just a dream. I didn't really envision it happening anytime soon, but I always thought that the Democrats have had control of this area for so long, and the results were not good.
Abysmal, right? Embarrassing.
Abysmal.
Yeah.
Just decades of population loss, economic decline across the board. Our inner cities, Youngstown and Warren, just continue to deteriorate. Maybe outside of work that's been done in the downtowns of both cities, but it's been disappointing. And so the first glimpse of some bit of a change was when the Mahoning County auditor, Ralph Meacham, won. And his was a little situation because the Democrat in that case is under some issues, but it was the first taste of a Republican winning countywide in Mahoning County, where Youngstown's located. And he's done a tremendous job. He had a great background. And I always thought that if a Republican could get in there and prove to people that they know what they're doing and that they're doing it for the right reasons and can do a great job in fighting for their constituents, it would pay dividends. And then Donald Trump came along in 2016 and really pushed that populism that was really lacking, I would say, in the Republican Party into the Republican Party. And we're an area, Dane, as you know, Jim trafficking, right?
Yeah.
90s, that type of voter, maybe not a lot of ultra liberals here like you would find in San Francisco, but a different type of Democrat that was in our area. And then when Trump came along, things have just changed. And as the party has evolved, Republicans have continued to excel locally. Trump won Mahoning and Trumbull counties in 2020, continued success in 2022 with JD Vance and Governor DeWine, and fully expect Trump to win by even greater margins in this upcoming November election.
It what's important to recognize is like the talk about the populists and populism. I think a lot of people like to denigrate it because it's easy, but nobody likes to actually look at the populist critique. And the populist critique was fundamentally correct, right? And it was a critique against a bipartisan policy establishment from both the Republicans and Democrats. And this was such a ideological, the establishment thinking was so solidified and it was so wrong that it took an outsider, frankly, no one's idea of the picture perfect president to kind of break through the stasis, the intellectual stasis that had developed. Like let's look at where the populists were and look at the bipartisan, and it truly is bipartisan. It's Republican elites and it's Democrat elites. The Afghan war was a disaster. What did we accomplish there? Right? We left with 20 years. And by the end of it, it was just NGOs milking the American taxpayer, trying to teach Afghan girls about, like how to read and write, which maybe is a noble goal in and of itself, but is it really the purpose of the American military? No. Disaster. The Iraq War, total disaster, right? We were trying to establish a secular democracy in Iraq as a way to stop the creation of terrorism when the 9/11 attacks were essentially supported by, or the most charitable interpretation, turned a blind eye by the Saudi Arabians, right? Disaster, went nowhere, empowered Iran, destabilized the region. So those are two bipartisan, and they were led by the Republicans, but a lot of Democrats butt off on that. But it's not just that, right? It's also the deindustrialization of America. Starting with the NAFTA passed under Clinton, China joined the WTO in 2001 under Bush, Obama saying that he would eliminate NAFTA and then not, and then pushing the TPP, and Hillary Clinton, by the way, wanting a continental hemispheric market of open borders. Free trade destroyed the industrial capacity of this country. And, we were promised cheap products. And then in COVID, we realized not only did we not have an industrial base anymore, but we didn't have the cheap products, right? So this was a third ideological consensus establishment position. Populists like Pat Buchanan critiqued it. And guess what? They were right. And then it's not just those three big ones. Immigration, like immigration to me is the big fundamental issue of this election. And immigration goes to what kind of identity are we as a country? Who are we as a people? We're not just a marketplace, right? People don't fight and die for a marketplace. They fight and die for a country, for their home. Illegal immigration has suppressed the wages of those at the bottom of the wage scale. But then now increasingly legal immigration and the major expansion of legal immigration is hurting middle class families. It's fundamentally unjust and unfair to say to American citizens, go get a college degree. And oh, by the way, when you enter into that job market, you're going to be competing globally against people being imported, willing to underwork you and undercut your wage, people that can live 4 to a room. So they're going to drive up rental prices. They're going to drive up housing prices. And we're just going to inundate the market, right, with them and totally undercut your family formation, right? You want to talk about a demographic crisis. People can't afford families because of the wages and the cost of living gone up. Well, why is the cost of living so high? Because we've had a massive surge of both legal and illegal immigration. Bipartisan policy position, Trump ran against it, and then Biden accelerated it. So this populist critique is not only wins votes, but I think at the end of the day, it's right. And that's the big thing I've always made about Donald Trump is that nobody wanted to debate Trump on the issues. By the way, can we talk about the COVID stuff? I know that's nobody remembers COVID anymore. It's all in the rearview mirror. But all the COVID measures that they were endorsing, the medical establishment of wearing masks, get vaccinated, lockdowns, masking children, shutting down the schools, all of those were totally bunk, right? It was just garbage. And now they admit it, right? The FDA director in a congressional hearing the other day said like the vaccine had side effects. I'm not trying to go all anti-vaxxer. Here's the fundamental point is that like Donald Trump is popular and supported and people are willing to die for him for a reason because he injected and needed clarity into the debate. I'll pause, but
You had a lot built up from the lack of the fact we haven't had an episode in 15 months, right, Dane? You had a lot to get off your
sorry,
chest
totally.
there. We did have a couple comments come in. Gabriel is asking how many years until California reacts the same as the Mahoning Valley did in terms of political evolution of sorts.
Well, look, I think California, California, two things happened. It was the most Republican state in the union, right? Ronald Reagan was the governor. Nixon was from California. Pete Wilson, as recently as the early 90s, won California. Two things changed California. One is the demographics with illegal immigration and the massive surge of immigration. But also the California native population also moved to the left. And they've benefited dramatically from this globalization, low interest rate, tech, world. And I think California should be a naturally prosperous land, but they prospered so much that they could afford really stupid ideas like letting homeless camps fester. And with Elon Musk recently announcing that SpaceX and Twitter are moving to Texas, like there are other economically dynamic regions in the United States that are benefiting. And I think California is going to have a come to Jesus moment where they realize that capital is, it's mobile. People can leave. And I think people are leaving. And eventually they're going to have to say, like, what do we do? And by the way, the surplus that Gavin Newsom was touting was all federal funds. And that's going away. Right. So, like, eventually they're going to have to pick it. Do you either become poor in a crap hole, right, with homeless camps, or do you move to the right? I don't know. I mean, like, they could just double down, right, and continue to, pass out heroin needles. I don't know. So maybe they just stay blue and they kind of commit suicide. There is a suicidal element to the left. There's a worship of death, whether it's euthanasia, whether it's abortion, which is like their Eucharistic sacrament, right? In Eucharist, it's the body of Christ. Christ freely gave up his life, and in abortion, it's like a innocent unborn child. I'm going off the deep end, but there is something there. It's like these people aren't entirely pragmatic. So I think California could easily stay blue, or they could have a right-wing surge. I don't know.
Yes. Another question we got from Dominic. Trump mentioned off script that he thinks we should have international students that graduate from college get a green card with their diploma. What are your thoughts? And real quick before you respond to that, if anybody throughout the episode has any questions, leave them in the chat, whether it's on YouTube or we're also on Twitch tonight, which we're never typically on. So if anybody has questions, let us know. We'll post them for you.
Well, I don't know what you think, Mike. I think it's a horrible idea. It's a stupid idea. And like you guys should study Canada and the UK and what's going on there. Two Anglophone countries where they replicated that policy. The UK, since Brexit, has seen a surge of immigration. A lot of it legal, parts of it illegal. Same with Canada, right? They both have seen massive surge in immigration, and both of those countries are stuck in economic stagnation. The UK was in a recession. I think they may have just come out of it. The standard of livings have fallen. You know, the cost of living skyrocketed. That's why they've elected a center-left government and the Labour Party. Canada, you know, the Liberal Party is vastly unpopular. They did the same thing. So, like, this idea that we need the best and brightest, like, let's talk about what that actually is. With that, you know, you imagine like some, you know, maybe Ukrainian or Russian hacker that's really smart that gets a degree, or like a Chinese engineering student, right? The reality of when you staple diploma or green cards diplomas is it's like Indians fabricating their resumes and coming to like Cleveland State University, and Cleveland State University taking them in because they pay full tuition, and like they're not even able to speak English, right? And you're like, this resume is completely fake. That's what it is in actuality. I'm sorry, like that's the truth. And so like, you know, you'll have like maybe like one really smart kid. Yeah, we should keep them. I have no problem with that. That would be silly to send them back. But the policy, when you talk about that, it leads to massive surge. I don't think Trump was very serious about that. I think Trump likes to talk offhand, and he was trying to suck up to like the venture capital crowd of San Francisco to get them on his side. And so he was saying whatever would make them happy, and they love this idea. So I think that's what it was. I don't put too much stock into it, but it would be a very, very bad idea to implement.
Gotcha. So thank you for your questions, everybody. One more we got coming in here from Moving 7 something or another. Thoughts on Trump expanding the map to Minnesota, Virginia, New Jersey, New Mexico? I'd say 3 of those 4 are possible, and we'll probably get into that at some point this episode. But initial thoughts on that, Dane?
Oh, well, you're the polling guy. I think I'll say this and then I'll pause because you're the polling expert. I follow the polls. I've seen some interesting polls, like Trump up in Virginia, Trump up in New Jersey. Now, I don't think that's real. I think he's probably down in both of those states. But the fact that you're seeing like little flickers, it should raise your alarm bell. Minnesota's probably too far gone. The Somalis will fabricate the votes in Minneapolis, right? New Mexico, I don't know. Ever since they voted for Gary Johnson, they've given up on right-wing politics. But New Jersey and Virginia, I think there's something like that. I actually am optimistic on New Jersey. I think that there's something there. That's my take.
Yeah. So in going through that list, let me pull it up again here. I would say Minnesota. Yeah, that's a tougher one. Virginia, I think there's some valid. There's definitely some validity to the polls in that state, especially considering in 2021, Glenn Youngkin won there. He's very popular, and he was also my choice, and I think maybe Dane would have been your maybe number 1 choice for VP.
Yes.
And so I do think there's some, especially with what you see across the board in almost all of these, the notorious swing states where Trump has a lead in all of them. It makes sense that a state like Virginia would shift, maybe a New Mexico and New Jersey. We saw it with New York in 2022. And really the reason the House went to the Republicans is because of the inroads that happened in 2022 with the New York Republicans. They won a handful of seats that helped push the Republicans into controlling the U.S. House. And so there's even polls there that show that as a single-digit race. But again, 2020, Trump lost it by, 21 to 23%. And so if that state has moved 10 to, let's say, 13%, it wouldn't surprise me if a New Jersey, which is not as liberal as New York, would shift. But I would say of those states, Virginia has the best chance of flipping. But anything's possible. Minnesota could be tied. That's, again, what you said there would make that one a difficult one to flip. And New Mexico, that's just an interesting state.
Yeah.
One of these days we'll have a podcast on New Mexico to get your thoughts on that
I would love
state.
to. I actually am very fascinated by New Mexico. Like it is a really interesting state. Like, like in Illinois is a blue state, but it's like it's just Chicago and they're super corrupt and it is what it is, right? But like New Mexico, does anybody really know what's going on there? I don't think so. Isn't that where Los Alamos is and the nuclear research and the Trinity site? Like that's all in New Mexico, right?
That I don't know. I
I think
wouldn't be
so.
surprised though. It's
Yeah,
just
that's an interesting state.
yeah. So I guess we'll pivot. Again, welcome all the comments. We appreciate them. Kind of go back to this whole summer of 2024, leading up to the 2024 presidential election, in the current state of the race. Again, May, it looks like the Democrats were trying to take a victory lap with Trump, but ever since then, it's been punch after punch after punch of things that have gone against the Democrats. And I guess we'll pivot a little bit from Trump and some of the electoral stuff to, what are your thoughts on Joe Biden? I personally think he's going to stay. I think he's pushing back. There's probably some various reasons for that. I do think his argument that he won so many millions of votes in the primary is a strong one, albeit against one candidate who wasn't good. But where was all this pushback? Where were all these concerns from Democrats and the media months ago when somebody could have ran? Gretchen Whitmer could have ran. The Governor Shapiro from Pennsylvania could have ran. Gavin Newsom could have ran. But they all chose to stay back. And now all of a sudden, because one debate, all of a sudden, they're changing their tune. And it's backfiring on them. And now all of a sudden, oh, what are we going to do now? How can we do this? Because they see the polling. They see that they got a major issue on their hands. But I want to toss it over to you, Dane. I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts on Joe Biden. Do you think he stays in? I'm of the belief, other than like a day last week, I thought it might happen where they might pull him. I think he's in for good at this point. What are your thoughts?
So two comments on that. One is of all the, I'm a right wing guy, but there are certain Democratic politicians I kind of secretly like. Not that I would vote for them or anything, but like I just think they're interesting figures, and maybe admire's not the right word, but I just think that like I think they're interesting people. Let's put it that way. But I strongly dislike Joe Biden, and I want to use a word that's stronger than that, and I think it's inappropriate. And I'm trying to stay true to my Christian roots. I think Joe Biden is somebody that like he's not a very smart guy, and he used the fact that Delaware is like this nexus of corporation incorporation, right? You incorporate a company in Delaware, you do laws in Delaware. Their pharmaceutical industry and the chemical industry is all headquartered in Delaware. So he used that, and it's an extremely small state, right? So it's not very competitive. He kind of used that to kind of parlay himself, and through sheer endurance, he survived. He got on the Obama VP ticket, or the Obama ticket as the VP, but he was never like, there was never anything like Bill Clinton had a charisma, a brilliance to him. You might not like him, you might disagree with him, but like there's something there. Barack Obama, at the end of the day, did have a massive charisma, right? Joe Biden just got it because like the Democrats were too fractured. And so that's point one. The other thing I'll say about Joe Biden is I personally dislike him because this was the first time that a politician personally threatened me. So I never took the vaccine, and I've had COVID one time, and I've lived my life and like it wasn't a big deal, right? I had it one time. I got sick other times, but I tested and it just wasn't COVID. And like Joe Biden with the vaccine mandate wanted to fire people who refused to get the vaccine. So I could have lost my job, and I'm supporting, now 4 kids, but 3 kids at the time. And, Shanley doesn't work. So like it became existential to me. And it's like, hey, if you support Joe Biden, he wants me fired. And then he totally opened the borders with this massive surge of illegal immigration of like 15, 20 million people in legal immigration. So he's just been it, and he has this. His incompetence is matched only by his arrogance. So I personally despise him. And then to see his brain meltdown clearly he's going through some sort of senility. I don't know what the official diagnosis is, but it's happening. It's real. We're seeing it. Like, let's all be honest with ourselves. The man has lost it. And that's why, like, at night he's sundowning. He can't compete. But there's a certain arrogance. I really think it comes back to Dr. Jill Biden, who will not let her husband go gracefully into that good night. And they are raging against the dying of Joe Biden's light. And he's not going anywhere. It's an illusion. Like, they're going to nominate him unless he dies. He's not going anywhere. But here's where I want to get your thoughts, Michael. What I found very interesting was when they talked about replacing Joe Biden. We have a role called the vice president, and the role of the vice president is the president can die or get sick or can't fulfill the role, and that person's supposed to fulfill that spot. And we have one in Kamala Harris, but you notice that when they talked about replacing Joe Biden, everybody would be like, no, we need Josh Shapiro, or we need Gavin Newsom, or we need Gretchen Whitmer. And this was coming from Democrats. I'm not even talking about Republicans. So what is there's this consensus belief that it's not stated, but it's out there, that Kamala is a terrible, terrible pick. She is the DEI vice presidential pick. She was picked because she's a black woman after the George Floyd riots, and she's terrible, right? Nobody wants to say that, and even Democrats are implicit in that with wanting to pick like Josh Shapiro, but it's real. It's totally real.
You're absolutely right. He somehow managed to find somebody who's less likable than he is.
That's it.
And I'm sure you've seen the clips. I think it was RNC Research put out. I don't know if it's 3 minutes long, if it's 4 minutes long, but the clip of her saying, unburdened by. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Have you seen that?
I do. You think you fell out of the coconut tree? You exist in the context of everything that's been. And then her other phrase, the coconut tree, is great. Like, if you're like, what's he talking about? Like, look up coconut tree, Kamala. But then what can be unburdened by what has been?
Yes.
What can be unburdened by what has been? And she kind of says it like that,
Yes. But dozens of instances of her saying it. And it's just bizarre. It's almost as bizarre as Elizabeth Warren saying, I got a scholarship. Yay. I don't know if you've seen those ones.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah, that's a character one. Woo!
It's like, in my eyes, if she were to be at the top of the ticket, if I'm the RNC, if I'm the Republicans, I would just have a commercial of her doing that, because it just, first off, it's just a phrase that I have to really think about to really understand. And I think a lot of people will be like, what's up with her?
Yeah.
But I think we'll see in a debate with JD Vance and Kamala Harris, assuming that the tickets are unchanged at that point, you'll see her vulnerabilities. You'll see her issues. I think Vance is going to have a much better grasp of the issues. And I even thought that 4 years ago when Pence went up against her, just her approach. But to your point, like calling it like a DEI hire. I mean, in many ways, when you're saying that I'm going to pick a woman, or I'm going to pick a black woman just for the sake of picking a black woman, I mean, what's that telling you? And so that's the predicament they're in, right? So you got Joe Biden at the ticket, whose poll numbers have cratered. But the concern is that, okay, if you want him out, you can't really justify him staying on as president through January 20th, because if you're saying he needs to go out at this point because of his brain, because of his mind and his health issues, well, he shouldn't be serving any more time. He should resign immediately. And so If he resigns immediately, then Kamala takes over. But your risk there is that she might perform even worse than Joe Biden. And this is the massive predicament the Democrats have put themselves in by not having a contested primary. And obviously, Republicans have plenty of work to do in the months ahead. But at this stage, as somebody who's a conservative, who is a Republican, I'm definitely taking some enjoyment in watching this all unfold, because anybody with a brain could have saw this from a mile away a few months ago, that there were vulnerabilities with Joe Biden that eventually they would come out. And sure enough, they came out at the worst possible time in a debate against Trump, somebody who's 3-4 years younger, but looks immensely sharper than Joe Biden.
Well, it's a really amazing moment. You called me with Trump being assassinated, or the attempted assassination. I pulled up the video, and the optics could not be clearer in the contrast between the two candidates. And yes, they're both old, but people do age. That's inevitable, but they age differently. So the decline path is kind of set in, but the rate of decline is going to differ based on how much Diet Coke you drink if you're Donald Trump. And I guess Big Macs will make you live forever based on Donald Trump's health. But like Donald Trump, yeah, he's a few years younger than Biden, but like the mental and physical acuity is a much bigger gap than those years would suggest. And he's going to age eventually. And, if he were running in 2028, I think it would be absolutely unacceptable for him to run. But like, he seems vital. And the proof of that is he gets shot at. A bullet is 1 inch from his head. He falls to the ground, and then he gets back up, right? I'm in my mid 30s and I struggle to stand up sometimes, which is embarrassing when I'm playing with my kids. Donald Trump gets back up and he's sharp, he's collected, and then he does that like fight, fight, fight fist pump. Which, by the way, if that didn't inspire you, I don't know what will. Like that, I was ready to fight. Like after I saw that, I'm like, hell yeah, my leader, my king, right? This is why medieval societies had a head of state. But that was incredible. But I think it kind of neutralizes totally the age question, because it's like you can't say that age is a factor for Donald Trump, right? To the anywhere near the same extent it is for Joe Biden.
Absolutely right. And so you touched a little bit upon that assassination attempt. So I think it's a good time to pivot
Yeah, let's pivot.
with something that could have been cataclysmic, a massive change to the trajectory of this nation, to the world. Again, I'm not, we're both good, practicing Catholics here. I'm not trying to get ultra religious, but really the only thing that saved him, was by the grace of God. He moved his head a split second before that, or else he wouldn't be here. And just like stop and just reflect on that for a moment and think of what could have transpired had he been assassinated, and what would that look like. Obviously, he hadn't picked a VP pick right at that time. So going into a convention, which inevitably would have been postponed and canceled for a future time, but that would be a mess. You'd have just the American public in these polarizing times. God only knows what could have happened there. And then again, just the future of this country in light of the fact that Donald Trump is definitely favored at this moment. And if that person, that gunman, was successful in assassinating him, what could have happened to that? And there's just so many different components of the whole situation. But it's, to me, he's very obviously fortunate to be alive right now. And I think you could see it kind of in the tone of some of his truth social posts, and even him yesterday, just like the look on his face of, waking up, realizing, like, everybody says every day is a gift from God, but like in his case, my God, is it ever a gift from God? Because he knows he was this close from not being here right now. And he's a man with immense amount of wealth who did not have to do this again, did not
That's
have
right.
to run. He could have stayed, he could have retired, golfed every single day at his paradise down at Mar-a-Lago. He did not have to do this again, but he found it in his heart. He felt compelled to run again because he again saw what Joe Biden was doing, and he wanted to fight for the American people and the future of this country. And just like to put all that in perspective, this guy could have been retired. He has more money than he ever needs, and for his children and all of that. But he chose to run again, be our nominee, and nearly give his life when he could just be relaxing, down at his resort down in Florida. And so it just, the whole thing is just quite remarkable. Just kind of get your thoughts on that before we kind of go in some of these questions that I have regarding this attempted assassination of Trump.
I think Trump is a quintessential American figure, and Americans as a personality, it's brash, but it's bold, it's brave. I think of the entire Western society, what's left of it. Americans are the only ones with any vitality, any vim and vigor left. The Europeans are all 45 and like retired and lame. And Americans, we do things, we're still doing things. And even in our decayed state, like there's still this spirit that's alive. And Trump is like, he's not a perfect figure. He's not a saint. I don't even know if I would describe him as a moral figure, but he is a man of action and he is a man of vitality. And the ultimate proof of that is when you're shot, like what do, right? And he was literally shot, right? He stands up and he rallies the people, and like that's his first inclination. Like he had no idea there could have been other shooters there. Like think about this for a second. There could have been other shooters in the crowd, right? He hadn't, like, we know now it was one shooter, at least we think it's so. But like there could have been other people there shooting him, and he faced that bullet. I don't think I would be able to do that. I don't think like most people would be able, but he did. And action more than anything else defines a person, right? Not your intentions, not your words. So he's a great American, and I think in that moment, if he wasn't already in there, like he passed into the legendary American figures. Like he is not a Frenchman, he's not a Brit, he's not a German, he's not a Japanese guy. He's an American, and he is an American legend. And you can hate him, you can love him. Every American legend has like unsavory aspects to them and their history. Like Elvis has some creepy stuff, but he's an American legend. Legend doesn't mean a good person. FDR had some really dark things about him. American legend. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Donald Trump is in that compendium, right? And like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, you're still going to know who Donald Trump is. You're not going to know who the fuck Mitt Romney was, or Paul Ryan, or Tim Kaine, right? I don't even remember who Tim Kaine is now, but you'll remember Donald Trump. So, and this moment brought him in there, and that photo, right? That photo is amazing optics of him standing there, and the framing and the flag. Like, you should be a lot. Here's the thing I tell Shanley: there will never be another race like this one. Like once he's gone, the excitement of politics, it's never going to be there again. Like you will remember this the rest of your life. It's like living in the Kennedy years or the Reagan years. Like this is something that I don't know. I'm just pleased to watch the show go on.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And to the point of that photo, first you got to give, credit to those photographers. There was a few of them right there in the front, and right when everything happens, there's that other one where the photographer goes right on the side of the stage and takes a picture of Trump where he's like this, and you see blood coming down his face. But then that picture is one of the most iconic pictures that when you think of America, the rest of our lives, that picture is going to come to mind. Sort of like that one from is it the beaches of Normandy, or is it the one with the flag?
Iwo
Jima. Okay, so that's Iwo. Shame on. I figured you would probably. I should know that. But like, think of a photo like that. But that one, and it's just like the ultimate American thing to do. It's just an ultimate badass move by Trump in the heat of the moment. You just got shot. You don't know if there's other shooters out there, but he wanted to reassure not only those people who were there, his supporters, but to reassure all Americans that we're going to fight. And like he said, he gave the fist pump. He said, fight, fight. And it's such a thing that could have been a devastating moment for our country. And for him to get up and do that, probably despite the best wishes and hopes of the Secret Service.
Right.
I think our country needed that in that moment, just that reassurance, and that photo of him when he did it. It's just a remarkable thing. And so that's a good pivot to probably the last topic of the day we want to talk about, and just the questions that I have regarding this assassination. I'm just going to blow through these real quick because I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts. To me, the number one question that should be asked right now is why? If the Secret Service knew in the moments leading up to this that there was a credible threat to Donald Trump, why they would leave him out there. So that's number one. And I'll blow through these, or let's talk about that one first. Get your thoughts on that. But to me, if there's a threat and you're talking with local and state police outside, and the snipers are seeing it in the U.S., you're all talking, and you see right leading up to the shooting, you saw these videos behind the stage of the Secret Service making some movements. They had to have been hearing something. So why would you leave him out there? So that to me is the number one question that I'd hopefully next week is answered. But I'm, what are your thoughts on that one, Dan?
Well, go through. Can I suggest go through your other questions because
Okay.
I want to. I think these is a very good list. So that's number one.
Yeah. Yeah. So
What's number two?
So number two, the question is, why was there no police presence on that building that the gunman shot from? They claim that there were snipers inside, but I don't really see many windows in there. I don't know what good that's going to do. That's fine if you have security inside, but why were there nobody on top of that building when you're at like a fairgrounds? Think of like the Canfield Fair or something. There's not many buildings around there, and that one has plain view of the stage. So that's the second question. Third, how that gunman could even get on top of that building. Carry, he's going to be around people leading up to this, right? There's so many people there, probably tens of thousands of people. At some point, different people probably saw him, and somehow he has a gun, he has a rifle, right? And he somehow manages to climb on that building. So that's another thing. Then there's the video evidence of people who didn't make it inside the secured portion, who were outside just listening, who saw him, recorded him, were alerting the police that he was up there crawling and he had a gun. And why did they not act quickly enough? And then the other question is, and it was interesting because if you watch the MSNBC feed and take a step back, my wife and I actually had MSNBC on right prior to this because I try to expand my horizons a little bit, and I wanted to try to get some Democratic feedback on what they were talking about with Biden. So I'm like, all right, let me watch MSNBC. And so my wife saw this all unfold live while I was eating in the kitchen, and I ran in, and you see it. And at
What
that
were you
clip,
eating?
just a bowl of cereal because I didn't feel like going out to eat. We typically would, but I had a golf outing, so I just wanted to relax and eat a bowl of cereal. So I think I was eating like some Cheerios or something like that. And in the video clip on MSNBC, they panned to the right, and you saw to the right of the stage two snipers up there for police forces or whatever. But most of the pictures you see are of the over Trump's right shoulder. But if you're looking at it to the left, so there's at least 4 snipers up there. At some point in time, they're hearing something. They're all facing to the left, right? So they had to have seen something up there, or they're hearing that somebody's up there and they're trying to find them. But why is it that within 5-6 seconds of this gunman unloading, they find him and shoot? In my eyes, they had their eyes on him. My best estimation will say they had their eyes on him. Why did they not shoot? And if the idea is there's some protocol, again, that goes back to my first question. Why would you leave Trump out there if you have somebody in your sights?
So I think these are excellent questions. And if I could simplify it, it's they knew that this guy was up there and they didn't do anything. So why? Or why did they even let him get up there in the first place? And my mind goes to 2 areas. One is like this is the DEIification of the Secret Service. So essentially a competency or incompetence, excuse me, as an explanation. In other words, like you had a woman that was like 5'3", 5'4", trying to protect Donald Trump, who's like 6'3". That's just absurd, right? It's totally unnecessary. And then I don't know if you saw the video of like Donald Trump being escorted into the limo, and like the 2 women outside are fumbling their
Yep.
weapons. It's just embarrassing, right? And what you later learn is there is a push internally at the Secret Service headed by, I think her name is Cheatley, the former head of security for Pepsi. There's a push for like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they not only did they push for that, but they lowered their standards, right? And this is critical. Like this is a huge critique of DEI. They lowered their standards to allow people in. You combine that with the fact that there were reports that Biden and Dr. Jill Biden were both on the road and they had Secret Service protection. So Donald Trump was getting like the B team or the C team rather. And that leads to like this incompetence as the explanation. Nobody knows what they're doing. They're not very professional. They've been overworked. They see the guy. Nobody wants to take the shot, right? Because you have HR, legalistic society where the first guy to take a shot and then it's wrong. Now you're Derek Chauvin and you're thrown in jail, or something like that, right? Like that's kind of so it's everyone, nobody knows what to do, and it's paralysis, and then he clearly fires upon Trump, and then you have a clear excuse to shoot him. So that's explanation one. Put a lot of stock in that. Explanation two is more conspiratorial, and that they kind of like let Donald Trump, like they wanted him taken out, and somebody tried to kill him, and this kid was a perfect patsy, and he's a 20-year-old with no history, and then he just got shot, his head exploded, and now there's no, like, he's gone, right? So I don't know. I don't know. I kind of lead like 70% theory one, but part of me is like, incompetency or incompetence. Yeah, but like something else is going on here. Um, and the fact that here's what, yeah, this might have been one of your questions, but it's part of it. How did he know that that was a space to climb up, and that if he climbed up, there wouldn't be anybody there? Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, if he fired from the crowd, that's one thing, but like he knew to go up there, which, okay, it's a building, but how do you know there'd be nobody there, and like where the ladder was and stuff like that? That's weird to me, right? It's very, very weird. At the very least, it's not like some random guy decided to, pull out his gun and shoot Trump. Pow, pow, pow. I don't know. I don't know. What's your take, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said. I agree with your percentages as well. When I was in college, I interned at the Youngstown Warren Regional Airport, and at the time, there were from time to time candidates that would come in, and security would always come out in advance and scope out the area, scope out potential vulnerabilities, and make sure they were addressed. And the claims are that they did this in this case, but again, why would you not have at least somebody manned on top of that roof? You claim we have security inside the building. Well, that's fine and that's great, but nobody's going to shoot from inside the building and kill Trump, because from the looks of that building, there's no windows on that side. So you're not going to
Right.
kill Trump from inside the building. So at least have some sort of presence on top of the building as well. And it's not like we're just saying hindsight 2020 here. I mean, these are valid things that should have been addressed. This is the security for our president, and now also our former president here, and how these things could be happening. And why I give some stock and some credence to your 30% percentage. And I'm not one who gets into conspiracies much, but
You
I
should try.
will.
It's fun.
Well,
And
it is. I trust me. I listen to some podcasts and all of that on conspiracy. It's interesting stuff. But like in this case, it's one thing for like one thing to go wrong, maybe even two things just to go wrong, not go as planned. But for failure after failure after failure, and so many questions, and despite all of this, despite all these failures, you still leave Trump out there knowing there is a threat. Like, to me, if you hear there's a threat, you immediately just take them off the stage and get it addressed. But they didn't do so. And it just seems like, how could there be so many failures in what, a 5 to 10 minute time frame?
yeah,
When your job is to protect the president. So I don't know. And then there's so many unanswered questions about this gunman and his motives, and who knows what's going to come of this, because the FBI is now taking over the investigation. So I don't know if we're ever going to get the full story, the full picture, and truly understand his motives. But he seemed, kind of off the record a little bit. Maybe not a huge social media presence, because if he did, I think we would see a lot of his posts. So not much there. So, like, was he just radicalized by the media? Was he influenced? There's just so many things that we don't know. And it just makes me wonder, like, what if? Like, how could so many things go wrong when your job is to protect, well, in this case, the former president, but the Republican nominee? And that's why I'm just, I don't know. I definitely am questioning some things here.
I totally. The one statement that the head of the head of the Secret Service should resign, right? Like, this is a clear failure on their part, and if she had any sense of honor or respectability, she would quit. She said, like, that building was sloped, and so we didn't want to risk people getting injured
Thank you.
because it
Great
was
point
sloped.
there. I forgot about that comment.
Yeah, like it, that is just insane. Like the building had a slope, and so you didn't want anybody up there to get injured. Like I remember when George W. Bush came to Youngstown, I was at Ursuline, and like they had snipers on every building everywhere. Like they had the
Mm-hmm.
whole place covered. They did bomb scans. Eh, I don't know. This is it was just it was such a stunning failure of like people should be fired. I tend to think I my personal theory is they knew that they were giving Trump the lowest quality Secret Service agents, and they knew that some wacko somewhere would eventually try to harm him, and let the chips fall where they may. I think that was their calculation. Like, oh, he gets shot, who cares, right? And I don't think like Biden ordered this guy to kill Trump, right? That's absurd. I don't think Biden would do that. I don't think he's that type of person. But maybe Dr. Jill, but Joe, no. But I do think they're like, yeah, let's just give him shitty security and see what happens. And this is what happened. And can I say one more thing? Like, I think that the U.S. is going to go into a civil war is overblown. I don't think that would ever happen. Um, but I do think like we are particularly susceptible to something like a Northern Ireland style troubles where there's political violence. And we are a very open and tolerant society, and that's a very good thing. And we should try to encourage that. Um, but like a lot of politicians are undefended. And what I think would happen if they killed Trump is that like somebody, and this is totally wrong, I condemn this, but would start shooting leftist politicians, and then they start shooting right-wing politicians, and then it would be like a gang war, right? Both sides are picking people off tit for tat, and it's just a cycle and a spiral of violence. That would be horrible. It would be horrible for the country. We would huge dysfunction. So I think it is a miracle for America that Trump survived, because that's not what we need as a society. So, and I think Biden also, to his credit, did a very good job condemning it. And the press conference, like he was mostly lucid and saying like this is wrong. Like I think he handled it appropriately. So he gets credit for that. Most of the Democrats did. There were some wacko Dems that are like, oh, he missed, right? Which is just despicable. I also had friends with, and I'm not going to name names, that are like, oh, he actually didn't get shot. They were like Trump assassination truthers. Like I'm a Joe Biden truther, stutter truther, but that's like real because that was bullshit. But this was like, no, Trump actually did get shot. But they're like, oh, he's faking it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that's absurd, right? But those people are out there, and these are respectable people that their brains have been just so warped by the media. But
No, and real quick, back to your comment from the Secret Service director about the slanted roof. That's interesting that she would say this is how. To me, one of the reasons why at the end of this, I'm not saying you necessarily need to resign yet. I think at some point she's going to have to be fired because she claims she didn't put anybody on those roofs because they're slanted. Yet you clearly see the snipers right behind Trump are on slanted roofs. So what kind of BS comment is that? And then furthermore, immediately after they shoot this gunman, you see the police, and they look like a man in military gear, go on that roof, and they were standing there just fine. So that was like
yeah,
a BS comment from the director of the Secret Service. Like, what would possess you to say that? And so that's concerning. Real quick, we have a comment from Teresa in the chat. She says, and this is a good point, correct me if I'm wrong, but the shooter was not from Butler, which is true. I think from Bethel Park, PA, closer to Pittsburgh. So piggybacking on this comment, I cannot assume that he was familiar with that building, which is a valid point. So how is it that
agreed.
somebody, an hour and a half, an hour and a half, let's say, away from there, knew that was the building to go to? So obviously probably had to do maybe some research. And then I'm just reading this one on the fly. Teresa adds, I read that the building the shooter was on was supposed to be protected by local police, not Secret Service. Not sure if that was a fact in the case, but that could also be how the ball was dropped. And I did hear some truth to that the secured portion is secured by the Secret Service, whereas just because of the resources, they rely on state and local officials on the outside. But again, they had to have been on a frequency. They had to have been some line of communications. I'm sure they met likely multiple times in advance of Saturday to discuss protocols and all that, and what would happen if a potential threat, and how that all needs to unfold. And yet again, we had so many failures. But great comments from Teresa there.
Yeah, that's a good point that he's not from the area. How did you know to go to that? And it's not only the building, but like the ladder, right? Like if I see an industrial warehouse, how do I find the ladder to get me to the top? Like if you drop me off in Youngstown and said climb to the top of this building, like I won't know where to go, right? I'm gonna be looking around. And if you see a guy looking around for a ladder, doesn't that raise suspicion? Um yeah, it's just it is a really, really depressing in some respect. It's sad. Although I'll say one more comment on this and then I'll pause. But I was talking with a guy yesterday, and he's a Harvard grad, and he's like, don't underestimate the role of incompetence all throughout the government and societies. Like my 2-year-old or my second grader can tell you what a man is and what a woman is, but no one at Harvard can. Right? Like the rot is so fundamentally deep and ideology has taken hold. But still, like even the incompetence point aside, like there's still a lot of suspicious stuff that happened. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know. It's like the Las Vegas shooter. Does anybody remember the Las Vegas shooter? None of
Correct.
that made any sense whatsoever. Um, that's been memory hold. You don't see like you hear more about Columbine than you do the Las Vegas shooter, and he killed like 200 people or 150 people or something ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Gabriel adding some sarcasm here. If that's the case, if I get a leak in my roof, I guess I can never get it fixed because it's slanted. So, yeah, nobody who works for the Secret Service should go on their roof, apparently, according to this director. So, um, obviously, first time we've had an episode in 14, 15 months, something like that. We've had a lot to unfold. I promise you, we will be back much more frequently and have multiple episodes, hopefully many, half dozen maybe, leading up to the election. We have a lot to unpack. Lord knows what's going to happen here in the next 7 to 10 days. Still a lot of uncertainty with Joe Biden and the Democrats. I'm on. I would take the stand that he's going to be the nominee. I'd imagine you're probably in the same boat, Dane. Are you?
Yeah, totally. He
Yeah.
will.
So
Joe Biden's
we'll,
gonna be.
we'll see what unfolds there. And I guess we'll leave it with one final point I wanted to make. And I'm sure you saw yesterday that, again, there's polarizing times. And it's really polarizing because, again, the media paints Donald Trump a certain way, while the media also covers up Joe Biden's ailments. And I'm sure you saw yesterday that Morning Joe, they chose the NBC executives to keep Morning Joe off the air in light of the assassination attempt on President Trump. Now, I've tried last week. I was going to start listening to it a little bit more frequently because I know Buck Sexton of Clay and Buck listens to Morning Joe every day just to get a pulse on liberal politics. But what do you make of that, Dane? And I don't know if you saw today. I know Micah and Joe weren't too thrilled with the decision the executives made with keeping them off the air. But what does that say about the people at MSNBC if you're the executives and you fear what they might say in light of this assassination attempt?
Um, I think Joe Scarborough is a scumbag because he cheated on his wife and was sleeping with Micah, um, while he was a married man with like multiple kids, and it's really suspicious how his intern died, right? Which I don't think he killed his intern, but that's odd. I think he's a scumbag, and yeah, I don't. I think that one of these days, like, here's my big take, Webb. Alex Jones got sued for like $1 trillion or $1 billion for the Sandy Hook stuff. And I actually went back and read his quotes, and the quotes were relatively like, I don't know what's going on here, but I don't trust these Sandy Hook people, right? He never outright said that they lied. He just kind of cast dispersion upon them. He got sued for $1 billion. Okay. Well, like, does that same principle, does that precedent hold for the media? There's a guy named Joe Wilson, used to be a Republican pundit. He now works for the Lincoln Project. You can tell he's just like a bad human being by just looking at his physiognomy. And he's like, the only way Trump is going to end is with a bullet. He said that live on the air. Like, does he get sued for $1 billion? Like, does do Joe and Mika, when they are, cheating on their spouses and being philanderers, do they get sued for $1 billion? I don't know how that works. That's my take. Like, I I don't know. I don't know why like Alex Jones gets $1 billion lawsuit. But like, and the entire army of the media just argues for that Trump. I mean, like, if you say that Trump is a dictator, and like, let's be real, Trump is like an '80s Democrat, right? '90s Democrat. He's not a dictator. He's not like Hitler, right? He didn't write Mein Kampf. I've read Mein Kampf. I've read the Communist Manifesto. I'm not a Nazi. I'm not a German. I don't care about Danzig and the Sudetenland, right? But like, Trump has nothing to do with Hitler. But like, if you call him Hitler and you say he's a dictator and a threat, like, I don't know, like some crazy guy's gonna listen to that and be like, I got to kill Trump to save America, right? So I just remember when Gabby Giffords got shot by a nut job who had no political ideology. They pinned it immediately on Sarah Palin. And it's like, does that same principle apply? I guess it doesn't. I guess if you're a Democrat, they let you do it, right? To borrow the Trump quote.
You're right. All right, so we'll wrap it up. I was looking real quick on Twitter, and it's interesting because we were just talking about Kamala and Biden. It was a poll from Forbes and Harris, had Trump beating Biden by 3 points, Trump beating Kamala by 7 points. So it kind of, again, goes to that whole point of Kamala being maybe even more vulnerable of a pick if they were to drop Biden. So we'll see all that unfold. But like I said earlier, a couple minutes ago, I promise we'll have many episodes in the weeks and months ahead. I'm fully back in the political mode now. Again, I was a little out for about a year. I took a little sabbatical from politics.
We should do this the same day every week. That's the only way we'll do it.
It probably would be honestly better to do that. That way it's set and people could kind of have it. And obviously we're going head to head with the RNC, but it's fine.
How about 8:30 Tuesday?
8:30 Tuesday. I'll take a look, but we could probably make that happen. But
and then finally, is it Kamala or Kamala Harris?
That's the $1 million question.
Right.
I probably have said it both ways during this episode because, quite frankly, I don't know the answer.
I don't know. Did you ever fall out of a coconut tree? Do you think you fell? You exist in the context of all that's come. Michael, this podcast is now unburdened by what has been and what can be. I'm doing my best, Kamala. Okay, we're done. It was a good episode, Mike.
Now, you used to give us the sponsor of every episode. Who was the sponsor of tonight's episode?
Yeah, Zero Sugar Snapple. It's tasteful. It's delightful. It's only 5 calories, and it's Zero Sugar Snapple. So if you're looking for something that is flavorful, that has more of a punch than like sparkling water, and is relatively cheap and doesn't have a lot of calories, Zero Sugar Snapple. This is the raspberry flavor. The lemonade iced tea flavor is the best, and they are a huge sponsor of this show. Like, if you talk about the Snapple Corporation, they love right-wing politics. They used to sponsor Rush Limbaugh. Fun fact.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, very nice. Well, again, what can be unburdened by what has been. We'll leave it with that, with the wise words of our vice president. We should just end every episode with a quote, a fine quote from our lovely politicians in Washington. Again, what can be unburdened by what has been. There's like a pause there too. She does like a little bit of a pause. She does something with her hands.
Yeah.
What can be unburdened by what has
unburdened by what has been. Yeah. And then
all right, everyone.
cackles.
Well, yeah. Thank you for listening to episode 40, and we'll get episode 41 scheduled here, whether it's maybe next Tuesday, maybe next Wednesday. It says Gabriel in the chat, if you choose Tuesdays, just keep in mind there's still several remaining congressional primaries on Tuesdays. That is a truth, but we don't mind. We go head to head with the RNC. We'll go head to head with those primaries for the dozens that tune in live. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have the podcast up tonight. Encourage you. Everybody's in the political mode right now. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you share it. If you got coworkers that like politics, that are like-minded like us, share it with us. Even share it with those ones who aren't like-minded like us, and maybe we'll get them on the right side of the aisle. Keep putting forth that effort. So we'll end it with that. Thank you, Dane, and we'll take care, and we'll see everybody next.